Hello, my name is Mariana Escobar, and my presentation today is about behavior biometric tracking. All right, so first of all, what is biometrics? Well, according to an article on Kaspersky.com, biometrics is a biological measurement or a physical characteristic that can be used to identify individuals, right? But obviously, there's always a little bit more. Okay, so there are three types of biometrics. There's biological, which is the use of blood or DNA to identify a person. Then there's also morphological biometrics, which is what we're more familiar with. This is the Face ID, fingerprints, or eyes, and so on. We use this type of biometrics every day. Even the Department of Homeland Security uses it to maintain a database of people coming in and out of the country. And the last one, and the one we are interested in, is behavioral biometrics. And this is based on patterns unique to each person. So the way you walk, how you speak, the way you type, they're all indicators of your identity if the patterns are tracked. All of this information was taken from US Kaspersky. The references are at the end of the presentation. Okay, so now we can move on. Now that we know what behavioral biometric is, let's talk about data tracking. Data tracking identifies, quote, which metrics and events are most important to track, then collecting and analyzing the data related to its metrics and events. Data analysts actually do this. As a personal example, one of my professors used to um, collect data from people's Apple Watches to figure out what type of religion those users practice. He was not doing so for like a project, but he was doing this for a job. And they theorized that if they can track people's heart rate, they can see how long they were resting and at what time of the day, which helped them connect the dots and whether the person was at a mosque or at church and so on. My point is that data is very powerful, even when you think is insignificant, like collecting a heartbeat. Um, this can actually give information that we didn't think could be given before. All right, so this slide is actually just putting everything together, biometrics and tracking. And biometrics such as facial recognition or speaker recognition, together with time and location, it can be used to identify an individual. And it's another quote from cybersecurity: behavior biometrics are unique behavioral traits that are tied to each user. And behavioral biometrics can be used to verify identity. And we can track fraud and we can track that kind of thing. So that at a point it's good, and at another one it's a little intrusive. So why should we care? So if after my story you're not scared, maybe we should be asking these questions. What can companies do with our information? Is there a limit on what companies are taking? How comfortable are we with data tracking? How do we regulate companies from taking too much? And another question would be, how far is too far? So all those questions bring us to the scenario. So my scenario here is saying the head of development has proposed to the board of directors of a series of features that use behavior biometrics to add to their extremely popular messaging app that will enhance the capabilities of the app. These features gather a lot of personal information secretly. The board, led by a chairman of the board who has the deciding vote, is taking the matter under consideration. So the dilemma here is the chairman of the board voting for the proposed developing ethical? Okay, so in order for me to answer the question from the dilemma, I decided to use intended and unintended consequences to do so. So for the intended consequence here is that it's to use a series of features to obtain behavioral biometrics to add to an application, and another intended consequence is to enhance the capabilities of the application. The dilemma is telling us that they are only looking to enhance the product, so what could the harm in that be? So like I said, the intended consequences is very simple. They just want to enhance their app. But let's look at unintended consequences. So the first one I thought about is people could find out that the company is taking information about its users without consent, and that may cause people to get very angry. The company could also take information that is illegal to gather. Some of the information could be health related, which may violate HIPAA, which is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. It's supposed to maintain your health information within your doctor and yourself personal, and nobody can look into it, but that can be a possibility here. Also, it opens the company up to liability. The laws can change, and if people get angry enough, they can start a lawsuit that may warrant a change of the law about privacy and data gathering. Right now, there's not one specific law that deals with data gathering that is a federal law. There are many state laws, and different states have different laws, but this could be another problem. But I'll give you an example. Facebook is settling a class action lawsuit because they gather information about its users, and I'll talk about that in the next slide. And lastly, there could be a loss of revenue, and there's a big possibility because the company relies on people to use their app. And if people lose faith in the company, they will stop using the product, resulting in the loss of revenue. So these are the unintended consequences. Okay, so now let's look at what I said before about Facebook and US laws. So Facebook agreed to settle a $550 million class action lawsuit over its facial recognition technology. According to the New York Times, the lawsuit came after Facebook violated Illinois law because it was using facial recognition to suggest tagging of people's names of pictures, so it was recognizing their face. So in Illinois, they protect people from companies harvesting facial data without their permission, as well as without telling them how long the data is going to be kept, which kind of brings me to my next point because this has to do with US laws. So each state is very different, and they have different types of laws. Some may protect user data, some may not, and there is no federal law regulating companies at all. In Europe, for example, they have something called the European Union General Data Protection Requirement, and it regulates companies from using people's data. But in the US, like I said, there is no federal law. In states like California and Colorado, they have something like what they have in Europe, but like I said, it changes from state to state. The point is that there's no federal law, so as an unintended consequence, if, like I said before, people are angry enough, they can sue. The suit can be brought all the way up to Supreme Court to set a new precedence, and then what happens is that we'll be left with a new law protecting potentially our data. Okay, so in conclusion, I think that gathering customer data without their consent is unethical. Um, the best thing to do is getting people to agree to terms and services before downloading the app. The best practice is to always be upfront with the users and not violate the privacy of those users. I think that having access to behavioral biometrics is like having access to privileged information. The user is trusting the company, and the least the company can do is protect the data and not use it without consent. And we've made it to the end. Here are my references, and thank you so much for listening. Bye bye.